Greetings. Do without wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick video. And with that, today, I want to go over some select parts of John Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica, and especially as it relates to his sacred symbol, the monad. So I'm aiming to explain this text firstly as Dee understood it, and then from where I stand currently as a Thelemite who practices the occult arts and what I'm seeing out of his words. While much of the text is fine as it is, some is limited to the worldview of the writer during the days that it was written. Especially his Christian worldview, that is his predominant lens through which he's seeing the occult and gnosis. But we've learned much since, and so I would like to update certain parts where necessary. There's, I believe, 24 theorem. I'm not going into every single one. In fact, some stuff either goes over my head or I just consider it relevant, and so I'm not touching it. Like, there's a couple of charts later on in the text towards the end that I just don't see any value in. Maybe I'm missing the point on them. There's a couple of parts where he does some mathematics to explain, crazy numbers that to me don't seem to have any value. He goes into this equals 2,450 or something, or 2,500. It's just like, well, from a numerology standpoint, when you get into larger numbers like that, they tend to make less sense. The planets are related to the first 9 numbers, and then 10 being a complete cycle, and it's very Kabbalistic. The more numbers, the higher they go, the further they are from the unity, which we're trying to get to through numerology and the occult. We're trying to get back to the zero, the Ein Sof, or the number 1, the unity of God in the universe. So if you're going into 2,500 or 7,000, it's like, well, that is really far away from the unity. And even in the Book of the Law, it says all numbers are infinite. So they all are going to come back to that unity at some point. But yeah, there's just some stuff in this text that I don't particularly find relevant to the conversation today. But I go over a lot of it. So also note, this text is a meditation in and of itself. It's meant to be mulled over slowly. And if you're new, you should listen and then think on what I'm saying, read the text, and then come back after you've acquired much knowledge and experience with the occult, and then digest it once again and meditate on what's being said and symbolized. The point of meditation today is that of creation and the manifestation of the all from the not through the medium of oneness. But most especially, the focal point of meditation is Dee's Lamin, the monad, which is very prevalent in this text. It represents, in short, the 10, the 7, the 5, the 4, and the 1. And I'll explain what I mean by that in regards to the text as we go through it. So this was written by Dee in approximately 1564 and is addressed to King Maximilian, the Holy Roman Emperor of Rome, Hungary, and Bohemia, to whom Dee gave the text as a present, wishing the king a fruitful reign, right at the beginning of the text. So as you'll see on your screen, on the frontispiece is a relief print image with a ton of beautiful symbolism, including smack dab in the center John Dee's personal sigil or lamin, the monad. It's basically a symbol of the unity of God, the Pythagorean number 1. But we'll break it down more later on. Surrounding Dee's monad is an egg shape, similar to the Orphic egg, which represents the heart center and spirit, the consciousness, conscious mind especially, also the fertile womb, which, having the monad within it, represents conception, the miracle of creation, the divine part of the human that inspires, creates art and literature and science, and furthers life. The monad in the egg is much like the serpent coiled around the Orphic egg. This egg in the center is in some kind of mechanical device, and it's adorned by 2 cherubs on top. And you'll also notice between the 2 cherubs is a lobster between them. And there are also 4 animal heads around it, a goat, a bull, and a lion. Perhaps the animals are loosely symbols of astrology. Cancer for the lobster in the north, Aries for the goat in the east, Taurus for the bull in the west, and Leo for the lion in the south. Though I'm kind of surprised if that's the case, that he didn't choose the 4 cardinal signs, Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus, which are much more common depictions. And then in this image, there's a banner around the mechanism which states, quote, becomes the parent and king of all the planets, Mercury when made perfect by a sharp stable point, end quote. I find this interesting, as were a layman to look upon the monad, the first thing they would probably recognize is its resemblance to the symbol for Mercury. However, this statement is not referring only to the planet Mercury of astronomy or astrology, but the alchemical Mercury as well, the summum bonum of the great work. Also in this image are 2 pillars to the left and right, with the sun and moon upon them respectively. Pillars are used in many occult traditions, most often representing the masculine and feminine, which need to be reconciled within each initiate. But what's interesting is that on the sun pillar it says fire, and on the moon pillar it says air. I don't know why air is associated with the feminine pillar. And note that this is before Freemasonry in 1500s, so it wouldn't be the pillars of Earth and the universe that the Masons use. So these are definitely more Kabbalistic pillars, or maybe perhaps from some other Gnostic sect that I'm not familiar at this moment, but yeah, it's just interesting to have fire and air. Below the pillars are 2 basins, each catching drops from the sun and moon, which is very symbolic of occult alchemy and what in Thelema might be called mixing of the red lion and white eagle. There's also in yogic chakra systems the catching of Amrita through the Sushumna, and then you have the Ida and Pingala, which are sun and moon, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of things going on with the pillars and catching these 2 liquids from them, synthesizing the sun and moon as chemical agents. On the archway that is supported by the pillars is another quote by John Dee, quote, he who does not understand should either learn or be silent, end quote. And this is just solid wisdom for students of the occult or just in life in general. In fact, Pythagoras actually mandated a year of silence for every new student. The idea being that they learn to pay attention to every word and deed of their superiors, instead of interjecting their ideas and then missing the point of what's trying to be taught. When someone is new, it's very common for them to want to demonstrate that they possess some knowledge, usually in an attempt to fit in and make people like them, and show that they have committed to studying, that this is what they're doing, and they want to be part of this community. But what that often does is instead it turns people off. Those who have actually been studying and practicing for many, many years, not just lingering around occult circles, but actually practicing every single day, they possess a good amount of knowledge. And a word of unsolicited advice: if you're new, try to observe more than interject. If you're there to learn, just pay attention and try not to show off. People are going to like you if you demonstrate through action that you're sincere, way more than through your words. Plus, if you're there to learn, learn. If you're there to teach, then you teach. Just stick to your role. Now, especially a couple thousand of years ago, if you were going to a mystery school to study under one of the great teachers of that time, they definitely didn't want what you have if you're new. You're supposed to be there because you want what they have. Besides that, a lot of ignorant people open their mouths and it shows. Plus, you cannot argue with the willfully stupid. Even if you win that argument, you've lost by engaging in it. I like the quote that one who knows little thinks they know much, but one who knows much hath learned their own ignorance. If you're studying the cult, you're coming to know God. And the paradox is, God is unknowable. So until you reconcile this fact with your will to study, reconcile this conundrum of studying this thing that is completely unknowable, you really do not understand. So once you understand that, there's nothing left to say. You're trying to get to that point of, aha, I don't understand shit. So once you've reconciled all of this, you've learned the ignorance that's innate of the mind. The last thing to note of this image is the final quote on the bottom of the image. On the step, it says, quote, may God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, end quote. This is from Genesis chapter 27, verse 28, a portion of the blessing of Isaac upon his son Jacob. All I say is this small portion of the quote sounds an awful lot like Amrita of the Hindu scriptures yet again. Now we move on to the main body of the text. It's not terribly long, it's about 57 pages and loaded with images. Like I said, I'm going to break down as much of it so we could get through as much as possible in as short amount of time as possible. The text begins with an introduction written expressly to Dee's printer of this text, quote, "You see, my good friend Willem, how especially I esteem the most noble virtues of the illustrious King Maximilian, to whom I impart from the shrine of my heart my rarest and most distinguished secrets. I communicate these secrets so that others in the circle of the world can also enjoy them, thanks to your care and diligence. Parentheses, this is done in honor of the king for his extraordinary and regal virtues. Thus, others may learn by his example, as he not only wisely attends to the royal governance of kingdoms, but is still fully learned about the wondrous mysteries of philosophers and wise men." End quote. Dee then asks two things of the printer. First, that all of the body of the text and the images of his creation in this book be printed with care as clearly as possible. The second thing is, quote, that what he asks of his printer right now is not in a light matter. Make certain not to hand these books indiscriminately to just any man. It is not that I begrudge them this or anything better, but I suspect that bad things will result. These poor men may not be able to find their way through the labyrinth, as they torture their minds in incredible ways while neglecting to take care of their everyday affairs. Also, these men might persuade others to follow the same path, which will likewise be impassable. Even worse, impostors who are but ghosts of men may maliciously lie about its certainty, pretending that they had explored it fully. Finally, these men may boldly deny the existence of such mighty works of God. Based on their presumptions, they will first rashly attack these mysteries, then, in their despair, they will furiously make false accusations about my integrity." End quote. Now, I wanted to share why he's asking his printer about this for a few reasons. So, the occult is no light matter. While the internet and publishers of today have widely made the occult available to all people, it's still dangerous at times. If you begin working with forces, they can very easily be abused by a mistake, which can have devastating effects upon the magician. And further, reading these occult texts requires years of delicate study. One false notion made by mistake may be enough to drive one down the rabbit hole and go mad, thinking their lunacy inspiration. Occult knowledge is always called secret wisdom for that reason. It's not that occultists do not wish to share and that we don't want people to be enlightened. It's because it's dangerous and requires serious dedication, and not everyone is ready to pursue it. You have to pursue it. Nobody should be forcing it down your throat. You clicked on this video, you came to hear what I have to say about these occult subjects. Yes, I'm putting them out there for anybody to listen, and I take somewhat responsibility for that. But the other side is the person listening has to take a responsibility for clicking the video. So there's a 50-50 share in that responsibility. So I just like to always tell people, be careful studying the occult. You start to invoke energy, and if you don't know what you're doing, you start to go cuckoo, and the ego gets really out of control, and that becomes very dangerous. Now, this PDF that I worked the script off of is located in the description below. And on page 12 of the PDF, the main text opens with the title, quote, "Sacred Symbol of Oneness," end quote, and then it's subtitled, "John Dee of London, Mathematically, Magically, Kabbalistically, and Anagogically Explained to Maximilian." We now move on to the first 3 of 24 theorems. I'll quote the first 2, comment, and then quote the third and comment again. So, first theorem. The first and very most simple representation of not only existing things, but also things hidden in the folds of nature, and also in the exhibition of the bringing forth of light, is made by means of a straight line and a circle, which is accompanied with this image. However, a circle cannot be skillfully crafted without the line. Likewise, the line cannot be crafted without the point. Thus, things come into being by way of the point and the monad, and things related to their circumference, regardless of how big they may be, cannot exist without the service of the central point. So, I've talked much about this very concept in my videos on color, shapes, and numbers, which you could find a link to in the description below. In short, numbers, shapes, and colors are the primary Hermetic building block symbols of the occult interpretation of the universe. The circle and the point are very much linked with the numbers 1 and 0. The circle is often seen as one and the same with the number 0, which Kabbalists call God or no thing, because once it's drawn, it appears to have no starting point and no end, but goes round and round infinitely. It contains all potentiality within it. In fact, like when you see in AA degrees, they're always like first degree equals 10 square. So it's a play on the circle representing heaven and the square representing physical matter. So the circle contains all potentiality within it. It's a line which is made of 2 points but curved so that there appears to be no point save within its circumference. But the circle is made from the line and the line from the point. And Dee posits that the point and the monad are the start of all things. The point being a shape and the monad being the number 1, so a shape and a number. So these things, the 0 and the 1, the point and the line, are ever present in all of nature within the manifest universe. Moving on to Theorem 3, which is accompanied with another image. It's Dee's monad, and it says next to it, Monas Hieroglyphica. Quote, thus the central conspicuous point of the hieroglyphic monad refers to the earth, around which both the sun as well as the moon and the rest of the planets complete their courses. And in this gift, since the sun possesses the greatest dignity because of its excellence, we represent it by a complete circle with a visible center. End quote. So here we have the symbol called Dee's monad. The top portion of it is the sun and moon conjoined, which make up the symbol for Taurus, an earth sign of the zodiac. So as he said, the sun and moon revolve around earth. The equilateral cross below them is a symbol of the earth and its 4 cardinal directions, as well as the union of masculine and feminine based on the horizontal and vertical lines. In Theorem 6, Dee speaks on this cross, quote, here we see the sun and moon resting on a rectilinear cross. By virtue of hieroglyphic interpretation, this cross is able to signify both the ternary and the quaternary. The ternary as 2 straight lines, and the 1 copulative point they have in common. The quaternary from the 4 straight lines forming 4 right angles, end quote. This means 2 lines intersecting have 3 components. 1 line, a second line, and the point where they meet. This, as said, is the male and female polarities in union. And a ternary has 3 pieces, so the 2 lines and point. But this cross can also be looked at as 4 short lines meeting at a central point, representing all things of the number 4. Talk more about that in a second. In Theorem 7, Dee continues about the cross of the 4 elements, quote, an experimenter will learn that when homogeneous parts of the elements have been removed from their natural habitations, they will return to them along straight lines. Thus, it is not absurd to show the mystery of the 4 elements by 4 straight lines emanating from a single point in different directions, where they are each resolved into single elements, end quote. So think about that for a second. Water, earth, and fire always remain with and return to their source. A flame stays on the wick. A stream of water trickles back to a larger source. Air captured in a jar once released enmeshes back into the air wherever is surrounding it. And earth, when scooped up and released, falls back to the ground via gravity. So the 4 short lines, all meeting at a single point, first represent this fact, but then go on to explain that from the one source, all things were made. The light made the hermetic fire. The heat caused condensation. The heat on the moisture makes air. And the air crystallized, making earth. And this is fully explained in Kabbalah. But in short, the one, the monad, becomes 4, becomes 1, the universe or man, whose body is of the 4 elements, the micro and macro in union. And this is explained in Theorem 8, by 4 being the perfect number of Pythagoras via the tetractys, the number 10. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. So it's considered a perfect number because it conceals 10 within it. Now, by adding a cross to the sun and moon conjoined, makes the symbol of Mercury, the androgynous messenger of the gods. Mercury is the final product of many alchemical experiments, but from a planetary point of view, Mercury is often the offspring of either the sun and moon, the highest and the lowest, or the sun and earth, or even spiritual and earthly, two spiritual, earthly, and byproducts create this third thing, such as Hermes being the offspring of Zeus and Gaia, for instance. So there is an interesting play on this symbol in terms of creation via the male and female of nature and mankind. Dee says as much in Theorem 13, quote, "In this progression appears another Mercury, who indeed is the uterine brother of the first. This is clearly the fully complete lunar and solar magic of the elements, as the hieroglyphic messenger tells us most expressly, if only we fix our eyes upon him and lend him an attentive ear. He is, God willing, the most famous Mercury of the philosophers, the microcosm and atom," end quote. Dee adds about the symbol used for the sun, which is a circle and a point in its center, that the sun possesses the greatest dignity because it is the brightest thing the ancients knew of, and came to represent the symbolic manifestation of the divine light in physical form. But in its symbol, the circle represents the spiritual infinite, and the dot, the physical manifestation within the spiritual. Thus, the dot of this glyph represents Earth, our home, which, as an element, Earth is the final product of the light's manifestation process. And there, if you notice on Dee's symbol of the monad, there's two bumps underneath. I'm going to talk about that in a few moments, so just hang tight on that. Theorem 4, quote, "The semicircle of the moon is shown here to be above the circle of the sun. Nonetheless, the moon obeys the sun as her master and king. The moon seems to rejoice in the sun's shape and proximity so much that she emulates him in the size of her radius, at least as it appears to the common man. Finally, she longs to be imbued by the solar rays so much that she becomes transformed into him. Then she disappears from the sky altogether. After a few days, she reappears as a horn-shaped figure, exactly as we have depicted her," end quote. So what Dee is saying is that due to the proximity to the earth, when full, the moon appears to be the same size as the sun, and she glows, providing light for the travelers of nighttime. But she does this not by her own light, but by reflecting the sun's rays. So that's what he's saying here. And also that she goes through her phases. The light of the sun is blocked by the earth, so she disappears, quote unquote, and appears as horns, right? Just a portion of herself. So this is definitely an outdated formula of the male and female from human perspective, or applied to the human experience. So I want to talk about this. We're living today in a world where sexuality and gender are much more fluid. So you'll see in older occult orders, manuscripts, and even some occult orders that are alive today, women are seen as less than the man or less capable in multiple ways. And I challenge this. Woman no longer needs to radiate her husband's light to try to be more like him due to the phallus. Both sexes and intermediately sexed persons each contain both polarities within their being, and they must reconcile these solar and lunar forces internally, as is their need based on their nature. Everybody, I don't care what gender, what male, female, in between, everybody has these same occult forces within them. Some of them have more solar, some of them have more Mars, some of them have more Jupiter. And you have to reconcile what you have too much of in your spirit, your soul, your personality, and what you have too little of. And you need to reconcile these polarities and get everything into its proper proportion so that all things are functioning at max capability. Now, in terms of just the planets, the theorem holds, right? The moon waxes and wanes. She grows full, then diminishes, becoming invisible, only to then reappear like the visage of the horned god. And she even reflects the sun's rays. And interesting of heteronormative sexuality, what is being discussed is the maiden becoming imbued with the seed and the miracle of the creation of life, the swelling of the womb and the birth of her babe. But again, in terms of occult knowledge of today, yes, that applies to looking at the planets and making symbols of them, but no longer applies to the human experience. Hopefully we could update our consciousness to realize, male and female both have both polarities within them, and woman doesn't need to be more like a man, save unless she needs to get those forces in balance within her. And man, actually, if he has too much of solar force or Mars force, he needs to kind of get those other feminine forces into their proper proportion. So everybody has to reconcile what they have too little of and what they need more of. Woman no longer needs to be like her husband. A woman can do her true will. She doesn't have to make her true will be to help her husband do his true will. They could help each other in their life processes, but a woman's true purpose no longer is to strictly cater to man's need and try to be more like him. Moving on, Theorems 10 and 11 explain those two bumps under the cross, and they're actually the symbol for Aries, representing fire, and the east part of the zodiac. If you type in natal chart, Aries always starts in the east because of the tropical spring equinox. I use sidereal astrology, so that's actually, it's not on the spring equinox, March 20th. It's actually right now in April, about April 16th, I believe, something like that. But in tropical astrology, which is way more common, Aquarius is always in the east for the spring equinox, right? When you pull up a natal chart, that, right, just like a general chart. So let's read these theorems, 10 and 11. So 10, quote, "The sharp, pointed symbol for the zodiacal division of Aries, used by astronomers, is quite well known to everyone. It is also well known that this is the place in the heavens where the fiery triplicity begins. Thus we shall add the astronomical sign of the Aries in the practice of this monad, to signify that the aid of fire is required. We can summarize this hieroglyphica consideration of our monad in our hieroglyphical statement. The elements of the sun and moon of this monad, in which the Denarian symmetry is strong, want to be separated, and this is done with the aid of fire." End quote. And there's another image now, you'll see. So he has his monad, and then he separates it into its four components: Luna, Sol, the four elements, and fire, Aries. This symbol, while explaining the summation of the creation myth from a Kabbalistic and Hermetic manner, also is insinuating alchemical secrets. In the case of tinctures, fire is needed to either extract chemicals from vegetation or mix chemicals. To properly mix the elixir vitae, fire is indeed needed, often symbolized by the cucurbit and fire underneath, heating it. This fire is one's passions, their highest spiritual aspirations. Even on a more mundane, bodily, lower, as above, so below, the heat is also fire. Hermetic fire is also the friction that your heart and your blood makes that produces heat in the body. Also, in terms of sexual alchemy, fire is friction produced by sexual intercourse, which extracts the seed. And so this friction is the flame under the cucurbit. The cucurbit being the vaginal passage being penetrated. Dee's monad is then a glyph which can be summarized as 1, which is made the mother and the father, who birthed the four elements, and thus the number 10, which signifies the completion of the great work, and is then, by alchemy, synthesized from 10 back into the 1. The 1 is ever present, and there is always union in life, in the universe, in nature, but it's surrounded by a shroud, which is the illusion of division. So a lot of Hermetic philosophy talks about the veil of Isis, and it's not until you've pulled back the veil of Isis that you actually see this union. Theorem 11, quote, "The mystical sign of Aries, consisting of two half circles joined together at a common point, is most fittingly signified by the equinoctial Nycthemera." So that means the place of the sun on the spring equinox, the first day of Aries. "The time of 24 hours, divided in equinoctial mode, denotes our most secret proportions. I say this in respect to the earth." This then signifies that the earth one day is split into 12 hours. 12 hours for the sun and 12 hours for the moon. One solar hour and one lunar hour are not equal. Actually, on most days of the year, they vary depending upon what day of the year it is. The total hours of light and night are each divided by 12. So from the time sunrise to sunset are the solar hours, the day hours. From sunset until the next sunrise are the night hours, attributed to the moon, the nighttime. So you add up how many minutes are in that first set from sunrise to sunset. You divide however many minutes by 12, and whatever amount of minutes, that's going to be one solar hour. So let's say there's, I don't know, off the top, like 505 minutes in total of sunlight on a given day. You divide 505 by 12, and whatever that is, that's how many minutes are in 1 hour, one solar hour. And you do the same thing for night. So the first hours of a day and night correspond with what day of the week it is, and they correspond with the 7 planets, each hour, each planetary hour. So say that it's a Tuesday. From sunrise, the first hour of the day is going to be Mars, beginning at sunrise. And each hour, each solar hour that follows, would then be Mars, Mercury, then Jupiter, then Venus, then Saturn, then Sol, then Luna. So they follow the days of the week. And then there's an extra couple hours, and it repeats all over again. So if it's Tuesday, the 8th hour of sun on a Tuesday is going to be Mars again, and then the 9th hour would be Mercury, so on and so forth. Same thing for night hours. And this order repeats after sunset, at which the first hour of night is again Mars on Tuesday. For Thursday, the first hour is Jupiter. Right? If one does planetary magic, they should perform their operation on the appropriate day of the week in the corresponding hour. So he's saying something here about the 2 half circles make up one complete day. So the horns of Aries in this symbol represent 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, which is pretty cool. In the description below, you'll also find a chart for solar hours of the 365-day calendar, but note that it's for location New York City. So if you're not in Eastern Standard Time, it's going to be off, so you have to calculate it yourself. But if you happen to be in Eastern Standard Time, below you could find a spreadsheet that has all the solar hours, how many minutes are in a solar hour, and how many minutes are in a night hour for the 365 days of the year. So there you go. Nice little gift. Moving on, Theorems 12, 13, and 14. Dee shows how planetary glyphs are combinations of the circle, line, and moon glyphs. Thus, he is stating that all 7 planets are implied by his monad, that the sun and moon beget Venus and Mars, and in Mercury is contained the androgyny of all these polarities. Theorem 15 is rather lengthy but interesting, so I'm just going to paraphrase it. Dee regards his monad again in terms of solar and lunar influence through the zodiac. There's an image, take a look at it. The sun and moon exert their radiance and thus influence upon the earth. The sun's radiance is exalted in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, though in the next sign, Taurus, the moon is exalted, and Taurus is ruled by Venus. When a lunar eclipse occurs, the sun receives strength from Mars to persevere and overcome its being blocked, according to Dee. In Dee's monad, another way to look at the glyph is that the horned sun is Taurus, the moon being exalted over the sun by eclipse, and the Aries is horns at the bottom, making the sun circle the symbol for Mars. So actually the horns make that arrow, so the sun, the cross, and the Aries horns, the horns are supposed to be the arrowhead on the symbol for Mars. So here's another way of including a couple of plays on Venus and Mars. So the moon, the Taurus symbol at the top, the moon is exalted and Taurus is ruled by Venus. Aries is a fire sign. Mars is its ruling planet, but the sun is exalted. So you've got these 2 really cool polarities that is incorporated here between the first 2 signs of the zodiac. Basically, what I believe Dee is getting at, again, is the union of opposites, through the transposition of the signs of the zodiac. And he's saying that nature is ever in flux, and one force is always in motion, overcoming another, and and another force, which is also in motion. And eventually, these forces unite and equal out in unity. So if that sounds cryptic, I'm sorry. I tried to explain what he's saying without actually quoting a long theorem. It's a lot of words to explain that within all things are two forces, and these forces are ever turning. They're overcoming one another, eventually balancing out. And these forces are symbolized in every cult as active and passive. On a personal level, each person must reconcile these forces and find a harmony amongst them in order to become a complete being. So I just want to reiterate again, I think his symbol is really cool. It's like at the top you have, at the bottom you have the first sign of the year, Aries, and the sun and moon conjoin make up Taurus. That's the second sign of the zodiac, Aries, then Taurus follows. And I think it's just really cool how he put these male and female properties into this one symbol that's representing the unity of all things. So he's representing the 7 planets because the sun-moon line, they make up the symbols for the 7 planets. The sun and moon are the most prominent, masterful planets, the mother and the father. Venus and Mars follow, almost like the son and daughter in a sort of way compared to the sun and moon. And then you have the zodiac also represented, as well as the cross of the elements. So within this monad, you have all of the pieces of, all 22 paths on the tree of life, the astrological correspondences, kind of insinuated in his monad. Moving on, I want to say in Theorems 16 and 17, Dee is actually writing a lot of gibberish to communicate something absolutely genius, whilst absolutely concealing the matter entirely by writing word salad. And that's my opinion. Maybe you read it different. Maybe you're getting something completely different than what I'm about to say. But if you read 16 and 17, they're like a page long. What happens in my mind reading it is that Dee is connecting the cross of his monad with the 5 elements, being the 4 short lines meeting at a central point, five components, 5 elements. And he's also insinuating in 16 and 17 the letters LVX, and as well as the numbers 110 and 100, all secretly alluding to the light becoming the source for the manifestation of the earth. Now, whether or not he did this intentionally or not, I believe that his 16 and 17 theorems actually kind of pioneered the Golden Dawn formula of LVX. Maybe he got it from Agrippa, maybe he got it from studying other people, maybe LVX was a Rosicrucian formula that he was already familiar with and he was concealing it, I don't know. Maybe he was not even doing that, and I'm reading into this through my Thelemic Golden Dawn background. But if you read them and then you listen to what I'm saying, this is what jumped out at me, and I think it's really cool. So, let me explain. The cross is 2 lines, male and female in union, being one whole thing. The 4 quarters are the 4 elements symbolized by 4 short lines and a 5th central point. This signifies the 5 elements, earth, air, water, fire, and spirit, pentagrammaton. This brings us to the first Hebrew letter, Aleph, being the closest to the source. It's the first letter, so closest to the first emanation, Kether, the light. But the letter anglicized, letter A, has 5 points. The line cutting through the center makes up two arms, the 2 bottom legs, and the top point of the A. So the Aleph also signifies the 5 elements in this manner, the pentagram. So it signifies the 5 elements via the pentagram. Aleph signifies the Philthah cross, thus the 17 square symbol featuring the sun in the center to signify Ein Sof, the light, the kernel, with the zodiac and 4 elements revolving around the sun. That's Aleph. So Aleph and the letter A both signify the 5 elements in that manner. The equilateral cross can also be looked at as the union of 2 L's. So Dee puts this image in Theorem 16 and 17. One upright L and one averse L, Latin L, signifying above and below, the light of the earth, the macro and the micro. The Roman numeral L equates to 50. 2 50s, 2 L's, equal 100, the centarium, signifying the number 1 exalted 100-fold. 1 followed by 2 zeros, so a 1 and an infinity sign, if you put the zeros together. So the cross is composed of two Latin V's also, if you just turn it a little bit. And V is the Roman numeral for 5, and is also the 5th vowel in Latin. V was used in place of the letter U and W, but it's the 5th vowel in Latin, signifying again the number 5, or that it's the Roman numeral 5, and it's the 5th vowel. Dee said it was 5 times 5, 25, which is also the number of the pentagram exalted. And finally, this cross can be seen as the letter X by turning it. X being the Roman numeral for 10, the perfect number according to Pythagoras. And again, 1 is exalted and in union with 0 in the number 10. The letter L in Latin, the Latin alphabet, happens to fall exactly in the middle from A to X, signifying this formula, the first and last, and that which is the union between them. So if you read 16 and 17, I summarized what jumped out at me, and I thought it was really cool. He does a lot of playing with weird numbers on top of that, and maybe I just read through it too fast and wasn't interested enough. But as I was reading what I just abbreviated above and summarized was what jumped out at me. I was like, oh crap, he's actually pointing to LVX without saying Lux, the light, through his writing. So this is what jumped out at me. It's a connection between the cross, the letter A, the pentagram, the number 5, the number 4, the number 1, and then the Roman numerals, as I've explained. But he specifically used LVX, which are all made up of the cross. So you'll be familiar if you're into Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and I think it should jump out at you now that I've said it. Theorem 18. Dee uses this image of an egg with the 7 planets to explain the elliptical motion of each planet. Note that Sol is in the very center. Like in the Zohar, King Solomon posited that the kernel of Ein Sof is the seed of light and radiance in the center of everyone's being. The Mars and Venus, female and male, then Jupiter and Mercury, also intrinsically linked, but in a different way. And if you look at the Paris working by Crowley, he writes about the connection between Jupiter and Mercury. And lastly, on top and bottom are Saturn and Luna, or father and mother. Or the 2 glyphs of the feminine, again showing the moon foremost, above the sun, you know, the furthest out at the bottom, which would be the top of the egg. So it's exalted in that manner. And it's the foremost above the sun, like in the glyph of the monad. Also in Theorem 18 is a 3-line poem. What is the water, or the white of the eggs, or white of eggs? What is the oil from the yolks? And what is the shell of the egg? So I think what he's getting at with this poem is an alchemical idea. The water and oil being glyphs of the ingredients in various tinctures or elixirs, but also allegory for lifeblood of our being. And the shell, or even oil, could very often signify semen. Water is often synonymous with blood, the life force, prana. And the shell is the exterior, which reflects the interior. So he's using this egg as an analogy. It possibly conceals the albedo, the citrinitas, the white and the yellow stages of alchemy. So there's 4 common stages, sometimes 3. There's the white phase of the tincture, there's the black phase of the tincture, there's the yellow phase of the tincture, and then there's the red phase of the tincture. Some take out the red, some take out the yellow. But so I like to use the 4 colors. But so the egg is representing this 2 first stages of the tincture, the white being the first and the yellow being the last. So it's the egg and the shell, or the yolk. I'm sorry, rather the egg white and the yolk, the yellow, to signify the beginning and the end of the alchemical process. But he's using the egg also as this container of life. So it's a very cool alchemical symbol if you think about it. Theorem 19 posits that Sol pours out a fiery liquid, and Luna pours out a watery moisture, and thus, quote, the terrestrial corpulence, the fat of the earth, corpulence, terrestrial corpulence, thus the fat of the earth, of all mortal things is sustained, end quote. Excuse me. This draws upon the emerald tablet, that it is Mercury being referred to in the tablet, which Dee's monad very much resemble when it says, quote, and as all things have been and arose from one by the meditation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the mother its moon. The wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse, end quote. Moving on, I don't find too much useful in Theorems 20 through 22, and 23 gives proper proportion to Dee's monad for those who want to draw it and make sure it's very, like he gave exact measurements and ways to calculate. So, like, let's say you're making a pentagram in a circle, there are ways that you could use one of those compasses, like the little pencil that's attached to the point, like the Masonic compass, where you could use a compass to mark points on a circle, and you could draw a pentagram by making certain degrees. If you twist the pencil to a certain degree, and then you twist it again to a certain degree, you're actually able to mark on the circle where the lines should start for drawing a perfect pentagram. You can actually draw a pentagram with the compass itself. So he's giving very systematic, in 23, Theorem 23, he's giving very systematic ways of drawing the proper proportions. To me, that doesn't appeal. But I'll just quote something from the Theorem so you get a better idea of what's going on. Quote, we now present the proportions accurately notated, observed by us in the hieroglyphical construction of the monad, to be observed by those wishing to bear it on rings and seals, or to use it in other ways, end quote. And also he gives in 23 prayers to Jesus to give proper measurements so that his measurements are correct. And also he prays for himself to be more Christ-like. So if that appeals to you, have at it. Now, in closing, Theorem 24, the final one of the text, summarizes the text and features of the monad. And then it is followed by a prayer-like sentiment. And finally, the whole text itself is closed. He signs off with the Greek letter delta, a way of D. John Dee is signing his name through a single letter, the fourth of the alphabet, 4 being Pythagoras' Tetractys 10, which is kind of cool. He uses the delta of Greek, so it's the triangle. So we have already covered all of this that's going to be summarized in Theorem 24. You can read it yourself. So in closing, what I just want to do is look at an image posted on the very last page of the PDF. I don't know if this is Dee's original image or if it's just the PDF that I'm working for, but it has his monad surrounded by some very cool imagery. So you'll see it on your screen, and I just want to give a few points about it. I think that it's a really cool depiction, and if it's in his original book, that would be awesome. If it's just in this PDF and taken from, I don't know, somebody else that made it or whoever, I still think it's really cool and I want to break it down. So the monad, again, is the central point of this depiction. Now, unlike the opening image, this monad appears to be engraved upon a device that actually, it's less mechanical, and it appears more to resemble the Sacred Heart, indicating that the monad is like the light in the center of one's being, the divine source in each one of us. There are also small glyphs of the sun and moon on either side of the monad. On the top of this heart-like image is a flame spouting out of it, symbolic of the sacred fire, or the divine light, the elemental hermetic fire. Even like the Olympic fire that Prometheus took for humanity to become enlightened, or to help evolve humankind. And directly underneath the flames is inscribed Yod He Vav He, the name of the 4 elements, the divine name of God, Yehovah. And then above the fire is a woman. And in my opinion, it's probably Minerva or some other divine feminine, like the Sophia of the Gnostics. And she's holding a 3-dimensional star in her palm, possibly alluding to the Merkaba of Jewish lore. Lastly, at the top of the image are the words reflecting the words from the beginning image of this text. And these words read, quote, the watery dew of heaven and the fruit of the earth he will give, end quote. So this reveals the idea of bountifulness, much like the symbol of the pagan cornucopia, as well as the fruit from the trees of knowledge and life. The watery dew of heaven and the fruit of earth he will give. And also, again, that dew of heaven is kind of like the Amrit, which is extracted from the pineal gland, the third eye, through various yogic techniques, and brought down to unlock the lower chakra, which then unlocks the kundalini at the base of the spine, which is then allowed to start to rise up and actually fully unlock the true potential of each one of those chakras one at a time as you do your occult work. Finally, in closing, take what we've explored and meditate upon it in regards to your being as well as the world around you. Your being, the 7 planets, and the 5 elements are all aspects of the human experience in the universe. And keep in mind that all of these things arose from and are at their core one. I want to just close with these words that I thought were nice and that I wrote down. Drink of Amrita and breathe eternal life in the oneness of the many. Love is the law, love and the will. I hope you enjoyed this. This is just my take. I skipped over a lot that I felt was not, just not interesting to me, or sometimes he's writing stuff to conceal other stuff, and so sometimes you write gibberish so that people get stuck on, ooh, let's play with these crazy numbers that he wrote down, because there's definitely something hidden there. Meanwhile, the real jewel is written over here, but he weeds people out. And if you're going to go focus on this nonsense over here, you're not going to see the jewel that's over there that you skip past to go play mental masturbation with, some numbers or whatever. Numbers are very valuable. Don't get what I'm saying wrong. But I'm just saying the way he used them, some of it was nonsensical, at least to me. If you find use in them and you could explain it, oh, that's amazing, cool. If it helps you, cool. To me, I just didn't care, is what I'm saying. But yeah, there was a lot of great stuff in this text, and I hope I covered it appropriately. I hope I illuminated something from this text that you might not have otherwise gotten out of it. Definitely give the full text a read. Take you, if you're a pretty quick reader or an average reader, no more than 2 hours to read the whole thing, I probably spent 3 hours writing a script on the whole thing where I had to sit down very slowly and go through it, So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for listening. See y'all in the next one. Cheers.